Today, I'm bringing you must start and sit running backs for week 16 of the fantasy football season. For most of us, it is round 2, and every win is crucial at this point. It's win or go home. I'll talk to you guys about all 32 teams, 16 matchups in total, so you can consider this your complete guide to the running back position for round 2 of the playoffs. All right, the first matchup we're going to look at is the Saints at the Rams. This is Thursday Night Football. And there's a lot to play for both of these teams. Both teams are really fighting for the playoffs, but it's a 44.5 point over under, and the Rams are favored at home. Alvin Kamara, obviously, you're going to start Alvin Kamara. He's the RB5 in fantasy football this year, and he missed 3 games to start the season. He's on track to have over 100 targets in a limited season. I mean, you cannot sit a guy like Alvin Kamara. He could be the reason you win your fantasy championship. Now, it is a really, really difficult matchup for both of these running backs, but you got 2 running backs that you just cannot sit. It doesn't matter how small your leagues are. These guys have got to be in your starting lineup, and that includes Kyren Williams, who since coming back is averaging well over 24 fantasy points per game. The guy's getting the targets, he's getting the touchdowns, and he is super efficient on the ground, including against really tough defenses in Cleveland and Baltimore. Versus Cleveland, he averaged over 4 yards per carry. Versus Baltimore, he averaged over 4.5 yards per carry. And both of those games, he had over 20 rushing attempts. So it wasn't like he just had a couple. I mean, he is absolutely dominating so far for this team since coming back from injury. So he needs to be in your lineups locked and loaded. All right, the second game that we're going to look at, we have 2 Saturday games this week, guys. So keep that in mind. 2 games on Saturday. This is the Bengals at the Steelers. That's the first game. There's a 38.5 point over under, and the Bengals are favored even though the Steelers are at home. So Vegas is telling you the Bengals are potentially going to win this game. But as for Joe Mixon, we're going to label him a must start. In all of his last 3 games, he's gotten over 15 PPR points. He has 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. He's been on an absolute roll. Actually, since Joe Burrow rather, went down with an injury, Mixon has been the focal point of this offense. You cannot sit him. Now, as for Chase Brown, he's a really exciting dynasty running back, but not someone that you can really trust in your roster at this point. And as for the Steelers, man, it is really, really gross looking at this backfield for fantasy football. It looked like Najee Harris had really established an important role once they fired their offensive coordinator, but last week, he only got 12 touches, and he averaged 2.7 yards per carry. Meanwhile, Jaylen Warren had 16 total touches, including 6 targets. So Najee Harris, you're probably not in the playoffs if you have this guy on your roster anyway, but you cannot start him, in my personal opinion, with your life on the line. And as far as Jaylen Warren goes, he is a spot start in the sense of he just gives you a safe floor in PPR formats. We're talking about a guy who's averaging about 5.5 targets in the last couple weeks. So you can definitely put him into your lineups, but don't expect him to be the reason you win a week per se. The third matchup we're going to look at here is the second of 2 Saturday games, the Bills at the Chargers. And James Cook, those people who love James Cook, I mean, he is getting unleashed by this Buffalo Bills offense in the last couple weeks. Really, since they let go of their offensive coordinator, James Cook has absolutely dominated. He has been the feature weapon in this offense, an offense that includes Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, it is the James Cook show right now. Last week, he had 28 total touches, back-to-back games over 25 PPR points, and now he gets to face the Chargers, who give up the 6th most points to fantasy running backs. James Cook could be the league-winning running back in fantasy this year, but at least for this week, he needs to be in your lineups. Now, as far as the Chargers, things get a little bit messy. Austin Eckler played just 40% of the snaps last week. Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller were all mixed in. We heard the coaching staff say that they're going to get those guys more and more involved. Now we have no Justin Herbert. The offense isn't very good. This team just got absolutely embarrassed. You can spot start Austin Eckler, okay? We know how talented he is. If they're in a game and it's competitive, he's probably getting 6 to 7 to 10 targets a game. But you should kind of view Eckler like Jaylen Warren at this point. A guy with a decent floor because of his PPR upside, but probably not a guy that's going to be the reason you win any sort of fantasy championships this year. All right, moving on to the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games on Sunday. We've got the Colts at the Falcons. There's a 44.5 point over-under, and the Colts are favored away from home. Now, according to Shane Steichen, say that 3 times fast, Jonathan Taylor is feeling good, which means he's trending up. He might play this week. If Jonathan Taylor plays, you can absolutely start him. It is not a good matchup, but we saw before Jonathan Taylor was injured, he was their feature weapon in this backfield. So if Taylor's going to be back and ready to go, we're going to put him into our lineups. Now, Zach Moss is a spot start if JT does not play, and that is because of the kind of volume that Moss is seeing when JT is not playing. So again, Moss only a consideration if JT doesn't play, but honestly, even if JT is out, there's at least 24 running backs I'd rather start over Zach Moss this week. As for the Falcons, I can already tell there's going to be people upset with me labeling Bijan Robinson a must start, but I am labeling him a must start. I did the same thing, after his down game in week 9 versus Minnesota. He got to play the Arizona Cardinals. He went out and put up 17.5 PPR points. It was a good matchup. And now he gets to face the Colts, who give up the 4th most points to fantasy running backs. I do not suggest sitting Bijan Robinson with your life on the line against this Colts defense. When you adjust for schedule, the Colts are an even better matchup. So it's just my personal opinion, but I would absolutely be playing Bijan with confidence if I had him in my lineups. Now, look, we can't predict what Arthur Smith is going to do. If that's what you're saying right now, I'll give you credit. We can't. But it's an incredible matchup, and Bijan is going to bounce back. He is a supreme talent. All right, the 5th matchup we're going to look at is the Packers at the Panthers. There's a 36.5 point over-under, and the Packers are favored away from home. Aaron Jones is back. He is healthy, and he just saw 17 total opportunities. And now he gets to play the Panthers, who give up the 3rd most points to fantasy running backs. I'm labeling him a must-start. If you're in smaller leagues, I can understand why you might not want to start him, but I'm labeling him a must-start simply because the matchup is great. A.J. Dillon is dealing with his own injury, and he just saw 17 total touches. I think Aaron Jones could have a vintage Aaron Jones kind of day this week. Now, as far as Chuba Hubbard goes, he is a volume play at this point. Let me read you his total opportunities since week 12. You guys ready for this? Per game, okay? 19 total touches, 25 total touches, 25 total touches, 24 total touches. Now, he is getting a ridiculous amount of volume. He's undoubtedly in that time span top 5 in volume in the running back position. So if you want to play him purely based off volume, you can. It is a good matchup. The Packers are a top 10 matchup, but just don't expect a lot of explosive plays from this Panthers offense. And again, similar to Zach Moss, I think there are at least 24 running backs out there that are a better play this week. All right, number 6 matchup of the week, the Browns at the Texans, 42.5 point over-under, and right now the Texans are favored at home. How about that? As far as the Texans go, Devin Singletary, I'm going to go ahead and label a must start. Now, we need to know if CJ Stroud is playing or not. But to be fair, even last week without CJ Stroud, Devin Singletary had 31 total touches, averaging over 4.6 yards per carry, and finished with 21 PPR points. We have slowly but surely seen Devin Singletary completely take over this role in Houston. We're talking about Dameon Pierce, who last week played 5% of the snaps and had 1 total touch. It seems to me that the Texans are making it very clear who their preferred running back is, and that is Devin Singletary. I would play Devin over the likes of Chuba Hubbard. I play him, again, if CJ Stroud is playing, because that offense is going to be better. So keep that in mind. Now, as far as the Browns go, Jerome Ford is a fine play, but the volume just hasn't been there for Jerome Ford. He and Kareem Hunt are truly splitting touches kind of down the middle. They're getting Pierre Strong a little bit involved as well. I'm not sure if they're scaling back Jerome Ford's usage because of his injury that he's been dealing with, but it's a little bit concerning for me. The Texans sound like a good matchup, but they're really not. They are one of I think they're 19th in points allowed to running backs. So if there was volume, it'd be easier to trust Jerome, but that volume is not there at the moment. All right, the 7th matchup we're going to look at, an NFC North battle. The Lions at the Vikings, a 46.5 point over-under, and the Lions are favored at Minnesota. Both of these defenses are very, very good against running backs. However, the Detroit Lions may have the best run game in the NFL, and they have two fantastic talents at the running back position. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. On a per game basis, both of these guys are top 12. You can start both of these names. In fact, if I had both of them in my roster, I'd probably start both of them at the same time. We get that question a lot. Now, as for the Vikings, and this is a big if Madison does not play, you can start Ty Chandler. However, if they both play, I do not see a clear start in this backfield. Ty Chandler, you would hope that he built some trust with this coaching staff. He filled in beautifully for Alexander Mattison. However, this team seems hell-bent on continually using Alexander Mattison. So I don't think there's a clear start here. I think 95 to 99% of people have a better option than the likes of a Ty Chandler or an Alexander Mattison this week. All right, the 8th matchup we're going to look at is the Commanders at the Jets. Yeah, maybe not the most exciting matchup, but there is some fantasy value to be had here. Both of these teams are top 7 matchups against the running back. The Commanders give up the 5th most points. I know a lot of people are going to be asking about Breece Hall. I am starting Breece Hall with confidence. We're talking about a team that just allowed Kyren Williams to put up a ridiculous 24.5 PPR points, over 5 yards per carry and a touchdown. Breece Hall is going to be a great option this week against the Commanders. You can absolutely start him. I know it was a bad week last week. Heck, I even got kicked out of my dynasty playoffs because I had Breece Hall, but I am starting him with confidence this week if you have him in any sort of league. Now, as far as Brian Robinson goes, I don't know if he's going to play or not. So if he plays, I'm labeling him a must start. That's because the Jets give up the 7th most points to fantasy running backs. And we're talking about a running back who is the RB15 despite missing multiple games on the year. So he has put up some decent production. However, if Antonio Gibson is the starter, I am not personally willing to go ahead and put him out there. We saw that they're going to use different running backs last week, and it's just not something that I really want to bet on with my life on the line. All right, the 9th matchup that we're going to look at here is the Seahawks at the Titans. There's a 42.5 point over under, and the Seahawks are favored away from home. How about that win on Monday Night Football? That was gritty from the Seahawks team. Ken Walker is back. He is fully healthy, and he is getting the volume. He just saw 22 total touches, averaged 4.5 yards per carry against the league's best rushing defense in the Philadelphia Eagles. He's back. He gets to play the Titans, who are middle of the pack against running backs. I am trusting Ken Walker with my life on the line. And Charbonnet just did not get that many opportunities. It looks like he is back to that kind of RB2 role, if you will. Now, as for the Titans, again, I know Derrick Henry disappointed a lot of people, but this is a very good matchup. The Seahawks are a top 10 matchup when you look at fantasy running backs at the time of recording this video, and Derrick Henry is the RB10 on the year. Yes, I know he disappointed people last week. He's been up, he's been down. However, in this kind of game, I don't see the Titans not being competitive. I don't see them not having opportunities for Derrick Henry to score on the goal line. So I'm going to go ahead and label him a must start. We know how explosive he can be for fantasy football. And Tajay Spears, he's a fine look. If you're in the fantasy playoffs, I'll be honest, you don't really want to trust Tajay Spears. I put him as a spot start because of what he gets through the air. He's in the passing game, he's averaging a good amount of targets. So if you're in PPR leagues, you can maybe consider it. All right, the 10th game we're going to look at is the Jags at the Bucks. This is the start of the afternoon slate of games. There's a 43.5 point over under, and the Bucks are favored at home. How about the Bucks as well? Just like the Seahawks, that is a gritty win to go into Green Bay and win like that. Baker Mayfield balling out. They have got to have a lot of confidence right now. So the RB3 on the year is Travis Etienne. You start Travis Etienne. I know it's not a good matchup. I know it's been a little bit lackluster, but you start Travis Etienne. Extreme talent. You start him. And he's getting volume. Now, Rachaad White is actually the RB4. So he's right behind Travis Etienne, but he just doesn't get the respect that he is deserving. I mean, my guy has been so reliable for fantasy since the bye week. I mean, there's only been one game where he scored under 10 PPR points, only one game where he scored under 13 PPR points, and multiple games over 20. I mean, he has been an absolute threat both on the ground and in the air. And this Bucs team is rolling while they feature him. So you have got to start Etienne and Rachaad White. Those guys are the reason you're in the playoffs. Continue to trust them. All right, the 11th matchup we're going to look at is the Cardinals at the Bears, 44.5 point over under, and Chicago is favored at home. Now, selfishly, I would like Arizona to win this game because I like the Washington team over there in the Washington franchise, and that would potentially help our draft pick. I think this could be a competitive game. James Conner is someone that you can start. Last week versus the San Francisco 49ers, he put up almost 18 PPR points, averaging over 6 yards per carry, and scored a touchdown on the ground. Now he gets the Chicago Bears, who give up the 13th most points to the running back position. Now let's talk about the Bears backfield, because for a time there, it looked like D'Onta Foreman was a clear start. Now we're talking about a game where he played 26% last week of the snaps, and he only had 6 touches. I mean, how do you really trust that kind of production? Khalil Herbert had 6 carries. Rashawn Johnson had 5 carries, but 6 targets, and he played the highest percentage of snaps at 49. But what we do know is it's a 3-headed backfield. Deonta, Rashawn, and Herbert are all going to get opportunities. So look, it's a juicy matchup, but I cannot in good conscience tell anyone to start any player in this good matchup. It just wouldn't sit right with me. All right, the 12th matchup we're going to look at is the Cowboys at the Falcons. 51 point over under, which is the largest of the week. Vegas is expecting a lot of points in this matchup. Tony Pollard is a must start. I know it wasn't good for him last week, but we're talking about a guy who in 4-5 straight games gave you good fantasy output in the last 5 out of 6. I mean, we'll take that. He's on an explosive offense. He's seeing a high amount of targets. You know, I know it's boom bust, but this team is going to need to throw the ball, and Tony is going to be a part of that offense. As for Raheem Mostert, of course, you're starting Raheem Mostert. He's about to break the all-time franchise record he actually broke it already, but he's about to break the all-time touchdown record this year, potentially if he keeps on track. But we're talking about a guy who in the last 4 games has scored 7 touchdowns on the ground. Anytime they're on the goal line, it looks like Raheem is their guy. He's the RB2 in fantasy football. You've got to start him. Now, as far as Devon Achane goes, I do think he's in play, but it was clear to me last week that they limited his play because of that toe injury. I need to see what the practice, report looks like throughout the week. Is he a full participant at some point? Is he getting limited practices in? If he's doing some DNPs again this week, I just don't think that that's a guy that you can start at this moment with your life on the line. Although he is a very exciting, explosive player. Okay, the 13th matchup, that we're going to look at is Sunday Night Football, the Patriots at the Broncos. Why? Why is this on Sunday Night Football? We've got the ability to flex games out, and we're not flexing this one out? Okay. 34.5 point over under. The Broncos are favored, obviously. And look, as far as the Patriots running backs go, if Ramondre plays, you can play him. You absolutely can. It's a great matchup. The Broncos give up the second most points to fantasy running backs, and Ramondre is the offense when he's healthy. But if Ramondre doesn't play, Zeke is back in consideration. He's going to see a ton of volume, and he's averaging, while Ramondre has been, kind of out with his injury, he's averaging over 6.5 targets per game. So that gives you a really safe floor. So look, I know it's not the sexiest play, but Zeke is in play if Ramondre is not out there. It's a great matchup. And as for the Broncos, honestly, I'd rather play Ramondre over Javonte, And I'd rather play Zeke if there is no Ramondre over Javonte as well. The backfield in Denver is so confusing. There was a moment there where it really felt like Javonte Williams was about to take this role completely over. And then now they're splitting work again between Samaje Perine, Jaleel McLaughlin's getting a little bit involved. So I'm labeling Javonte a spot start, but I certainly don't have the confidence in him as other names on this list. And he's just not getting the volume through the air either. He's averaging 3 targets per game in the last 3 weeks. That's not a very safe floor. So he's a spot start. If you're in a tough position, you can, but you're kind of throwing up a Hail Mary at this point with him. All right. So we are moving on to Monday, which, by the way, is Christmas Day. And there are 3 Christmas Day games. So happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Hopefully you're going to be able to spend some time with your family. But this is the first of the 3 games on Christmas Day. We got the Raiders at the Chiefs. There's a 42.5 point over under, and the Chiefs are favored. Now, as far as the Chiefs go, we are being told at the time of recording this that Isaiah Pacheco will be back. Coach Reed said he will be back this week. He'll be good to go unless there's further setbacks, but right now everything is positive for him to go. So the expectation is for Isaiah Pacheco to step back in. So if you were, playing Jet McKinnon off the waiver wire, probably can't do that this week anymore, but Isaiah Pacheco is a great play. The Raiders give up the 11th most points to fantasy running backs, and the last time Pacheco played this defense, he scored 25.9 PPR points, his career high, and he also caught 5 targets for 34 yards, so you absolutely can play him. Now, as far as the Raiders go, if Josh Jacobs plays, we don't know this right now, you can absolutely put him into your lineup. This is a volume play. Anytime Josh Jacobs is healthy, he is seeing at least 20 total touches, and we know how talented he is. Last time he played the Chiefs, he had that big explosive rushing touchdown. He averaged over 5.5 yards per carry, and he had 22 PPR fantasy points. So if he's playing, you can play him. As far as Zamir White, I would lower expectations for Zamir White. All right. If there's no Josh Jacobs, Zamir White's in play, but I do not expect him to see the same sort of success that he saw versus the Chargers last week. The Chiefs are a tough defense to run on, so just lower expectations slightly. All right. The second of those 3 Christmas Day games, the Giants at the Eagles, an NFC East showdown. Saquon Barkley is a guy who is super talented, and you just can't sit him. Okay. I remember in week 11 versus Washington, we were like, man, do we play him? He's been playing poorly. Same thing versus Green Bay in week 14. And then he just absolutely blows up for this team. So this is a guy that you can absolutely start. We know how talented he is. It only takes 1 touch for him to score. And as for the Eagles, I will label DeAndre Swift a spot start. He's coming off a game where he had 18 rushing attempts and 3 targets. So 21 total touches, but he's just not finding any success for fantasy right now. In the last 4 weeks, he has not scored over 10 PPR points in a single game. It's really tough to rely on him. All right, and the last matchup this week is Ravens at 49ers. We're finishing off week 16 with a bang. 2 exciting teams, 2 teams with Super Bowl aspirations. This will be a fun one to watch. As far as the Ravens go, we know Keaton Mitchell went down with a season-ending injury last week. So unfortunate for Keaton, but if you have Gus Edwards, it makes this backfield a lot easier to really wrap your head around. Gus Edwards got into the end zone last week. He played 40% of the snaps and had 17 total touches. While it's not a good defense to face, we know he's on an explosive offense, and if they're on the goal line, Gus Edwards is going to have a chance to rush it in for a touchdown. Now, as for the 49ers, of course, you start CMC. You don't need me to tell you that. He's probably the reason that you're going to win your championship this year. But that is it for today, guys. Thanks for watching the video. Do me a favor, go ahead and hit that like button to show some love. And good luck. By the way, this week is the last week we will be posting content for the season. And that is because we are taking our annual 2-week break. It's the only 2 weeks that we take off on this channel. If you don't know, we have a Dynasty channel. You can check that out in the description. So across those 2 channels, the only time that we take off for the entire year is Christmas and New Year. So we'll be gone for the next 2 weeks, but best of luck. And yeah, hopefully you win your championship, but we appreciate you. We'll see you soon. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh,
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.